Every revolution, there's one man with a vision.
You can't handle the truth.
And welcome, folks, to Truth versus News for September 3rd after Labor Day. Oh, my golly, everything's happening. Summer's essentially gone. The stock market is way down. And so what kind of things are going to happen this month? Well, I don't know what we all know, but Jim and Petzer, the most dangerous mind in America, and Scott Bennett, the most awesome intelligence officer you ever met, seem to know everything that's going on. So let's find out. Let's go for it, Jim.
Thanks, Don. We begin with a severe but sympathetic critique of Trump's prospects for re-election from Robert David Steele, himself a former CIA official who has become a major whistleblower, where he begins with a note. The invented criminal apartheid genocidal state of Israel is not to be confused with Judaism. The first is evil, the second is not. It is the Zionist parasite we seek to expel from the U.S. economy, government, and society, not the assimilated Jews, most of whom despise Zionism as much as we do. I tend to put it more simply to say there are good Jews and there are bad Jews, just as there are good Muslims and bad Muslims, good Christians and bad. Steele observes that there are 3 sucking chest wounds in the Trump administration. First, he's not defending the U.S. Constitution, especially the First, Second, and Fourth Amendments. Second, he's not putting America first. Virtually every day sees him putting Israel first. Third, he's ignoring the 73% of the eligible voters that did not vote for him, many of whom could be brought around to create the mother of all landslides if he implemented Unrig Unity with Electoral Integrity Reform Act in 12 parts. Now, here's his critique, which is very thoughtful, and therefore I go through it in detail. Trump was relatively unknown in 2016. There wasn't much to attack him on. Now Dems have his words and deeds for attack ads. Just this week, the fat shaming of one of his own supporters is red meat for the spin doctors. This had to do with his closest personal aide, unadvisedly remarking she was closer to him than his own children, and that he was uninclined to be photographed with his own daughter, Tiffany, because she was overweight. We are 2019 and Trump has little legislatively to crow about. Obamacare has been rolled back, but it's still around, not replaced. Lots of people are starting to lose our coverage, millions by election time. North Korea has given up nothing. We lost to the Russians and Bashar al-Assad in Syria. ISIS has gone from Iraq and Syria, but popping up in other places. The Iran deal is gone, but Iran's more aggressive now and has not collapsed yet. A war with them would be bad, very bad. They are 10 times the foe that Iraq was. But not standing up to their provocations also looks bad and weak, a lose-lose scenario. No infrastructure deal yet. The tax cuts had a short-term benefit for most people that's largely worn off, except for the 1 to 5%. The House has been lost. We're losing in Afghanistan. A precipitous peace deal could quickly backfire and see us lifting our people off the roof of another embassy. Those unforgettable images from the evacuation from Vietnam. He has very unwisely allowed himself to be painted into a corner over white supremacy. He looks and sounds like a racist, or can easily be spun that way, though I have no doubt he's not remotely racist himself. The one big advantage he has today is the economy. There are worrying signs of a possible recession later this year or worse next. Trade battles haven't helped. Also, a lot of external factors he has no control over but could hurt, like Brexit and falls in growth in key markets in the EU and BRICS countries. We're exposing an exporting nation, and recessions everywhere hurt us. So that advantage could be lost by 2020 or at least tarnished, especially if the Chinese don't blink and decide to ride it out, thinking 18 more months of pain is better than losing face. The immigration issue may solidify his base, but not likely to win new voters from any immigrant population. His policies are more unpopular among independent and moderate Democrats. Actually, I have a report that swing voters aren't key about having more immigrants into the country, who might otherwise not vote or even vote Republican if the economy is doing well. If the Democrats pick a decent candidate, which I think is highly unlikely, Trump's unpopularity will ensure a high turnout of Democratic voters. His polarizing stand in a less favorable economy might also depress the vote among moderate Republicans. Demographics are also moving against the GOP. The base of his base are baby boomers. They're dying by the million each year. Millennials are already the largest generation now. Immigrant population in key states like Florida are increasing and could be a factor in 2020. Ironically, Hillary failed to mobilize the female vote. A better candidate could, and Trump has done little to improve his image with women voters. Overall, at the moment, I see two things that ensure a Trump victory in 2020, a booming economy and a terrible Democratic candidate like Warren or Sanders. If only one of those factors are in play, I don't think it'll be enough. Remember, all the Democrats have to do is hold the states they won in 2016 with their worst candidate in a generation and win 350,000 more votes to take Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Here are his recommendations to solve the problem. His 3 strikes: not defending the Constitution. First Amendment, giving a free pass to big tech censorship. First Amendment, a free pass for 27 anti-BDS laws. Second Amendment, red flag gun confiscation. Second Amendment, not challenging false flag ops. Fourth, reapproving the NSA mass surveillance. Fourth, allowing TSA to spill into Main Street. Second, Israel first, not America first on everything. Third, not unrigging the system, 70% disenfranchised. His proposed solutions, and this is part of the sympathy of his approach: defend the Constitution, shut down big tech and create a Trump truth channel, challenge all 27 anti-BDS laws, double down on open carry everywhere, terminate FBI, FEMA, PMC false flag ops, cut secret IC, especially NSA and FBI, by 70%. Terminate TSA, including at airports. America first, expose Zionists, Epstein, 9/11. Unrig unity with integrity, election reform. Scott, these seem to me to be very positive suggestions by Trump. I'd like to see him move forward on that basis. Your thoughts?
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a very sound assessment that Steele has put up there, and I think he's right on a lot of that. The 3 strikes certainly do not bode well for him in his allowing of the big tech companies, the Facebook, the YouTube, the Instagram, the Twitter, to get away with shutting down conservative voices, shutting down Alex Jones. I'd also add that he has failed in his addressing the WikiLeaks issue. I know for a fact that he's had this material. He's also, there's other things that he has that he needs to act upon. But WikiLeaks is a very significant issue, and he needs to utilize that material that Julian Assange has. I think his best option is to come down on the side of a more libertarian philosophy rather than conservative right-wing establishment Republican. That's more middle of the road. You're going to win more swing states, and really the country is more conservative right libertarian than it is left. The Israeli Zionist support has been ruinous, I think for him. He's operating to a very small sliver of a evangelical base that are regarded by many of the Republicans as ignorant and delusional hillbillies, and not meaning to insult hillbillies, but you've got these idiot Christian Zionists that have absolutely no no sense of reality. They're walking in the fever of religious drunkenness with apocalyptic, savior complexes, and Trump is making that policy with these things as if he's going to be rewarded by the American people. He's not. Israel is about to start, I think, a major conflict to try and drag America in. And if Trump goes into that conflict, that will be the drop of the guillotine upon his neck. I've said from the beginning, one more conflict, one more battle, one more ship lost, one more plane lost with American kids, and every kid that dies in Afghanistan is dripping torture upon him in the eyes of the voters. One more conflict, and he is most likely going to be done, because it'll tip it in the balance of someone else. It's not about the qualifications of the other person. It's about him disqualifying himself. And that very easily could happen. Look at Bill Clinton. These platitudes, these political sound bites that he got up and said in 1991 were all false, were all lies. He was one of the greatest leftist communists that ever came in. He put on a good veneer. But when Clinton came into office in 1991, he increased the highest tax rates in the history of the country. And the country rebelled against him and put in the Republican Congress. Well, this could be a similar thing against Trump if he picks a fight with China, picks a fight with Iran, and Russia steps in. It does not bode well for him. I think the strongest thing he can do is the Second Amendment, open carry. He needs to instantly recognize that every fireman and every police officer and every military person has a right to keep and carry arms. That you should start out with that as an executive order first, and then translate it into the rest of the civilian population as well. That way he sort of boils the frog a little bit slow. He puts in, hey, everybody trusts firemen, right? Everybody trusts police, right? Everybody trusts former veterans. Okay, well, they are our deputies to guard against these mall shootings or other false flag events. But the Second Amendment open carry instantly shuts down a lot of these false flag shootings, because no crisis actors are going to risk going into a Walmart where someone who's not on script is going to pull a firearm and defend against something that seems to be happening. So I think Trump has time to cut it out. He has time to change things, but he's got to also win the Chinese and the Vietnamese and the Hindu communities, because that will send a reverberation through the white bread America that he isn't a racist. And that really is the only card that the leftists are trying to play. The only thing that Trump has in his pocket are two things. One, when he gets on stage, he can reset the tenor of the entire political audience, because everyone likes to watch him. If it came to Trump performing on stage and then people had to vote, I think they would all vote for him, because he has a very rock star enthusiasm that is infectious. So that's his good card that he needs to play up. The other good card is the dismal misery and stupidity of the entire Democrat platform and all the people that are on stage. Every one of these Democrats is a ruinous, self-hating, anti-white, anti-male, racist bigot. And they have no vision. They just have sound and fury. And the American people aren't going to go that way either. So as long as Trump doesn't break any of these options, he'll survive. The other thing is I think I could see this developing into it's me and you against the rest of the government establishment. The American people need to stand with me, and we're going to overthrow, with the right political rhetoric, the Fed. We're going to overthrow these endless wars, this military-industrial complex. He does need to be like Kennedy if he's really going to do the revolution that Americans want. So I'll end it there, Jim.
Well, Scott, let me follow up on a couple of points. Why isn't he going after the staged shootings? Robert David Steele and I did both a 9/11 and a Sandy Hook memoranda for the president. They're both really exceptionally good. They lay out what happened in both cases. At the very least, he ought to be exposing 9/11. And I just worry tremendously that he actually is putting Israel first and therefore not pursuing, because it would expose Israeli duplicity in 9/11. But Sandy Hook is equally as important, because all these state shootings have been used to manipulate the American public into thinking maybe we should give up our guns, which, by the way, I don't believe is going to happen. I don't care if they have one of these fake shootings every single day. But in fact, Scott, I think it reinforces the public mind. If there are all these shootings, how are we going to defend ourselves if we don't have guns ourselves? I mean, how can we defend ourselves?
That's exactly right, Jim. That is exactly right. That's the exact American instinct. Every American has long been DNA inoculated with the Second Amendment as our genetic right, as a very deep, infused into our flesh right to defend ourselves when the feces hits the fan, if you will. So if they did a shooting every day, you're right, it would reinforce, yep, that's why we have the Second Amendment. I guarantee if somebody comes into a Lucky's when I have my gun, they're not getting out alive. That's what every American is going to begin to say. Now, guns do not turn good Americans into werewolves or criminals or anything like that. Guns allow good citizens to be vigilant and defensive of themselves, their family, their property, and their neighbors. And I think all these false flag shootings are going to backfire because the liberal leftists are already operated with a lobotomized mind. The leftist Democrats are already dumb as a bag of rocks and are walking dead zombies when it comes to the true spiritual life and the Constitution. But the real Americans that value the Constitution, value the Second Amendment, are not fazed. In fact, we're becoming hardened to these things. Every time we see these, my instant default is, oh yeah, it's a false flag. And my defenses go up. I instantly put up filters. And this is something everybody needs to do. You put up filters, you don't turn on the TV, you specifically don't want Fox, you put it on mute when the commercials come or a lot of this stuff. You look for the typical sloganeering like, we don't want prayers, we want gun control. That's the new mantra. Senator Blackstaff were talking about that. So Americans are becoming increasingly hardened and are filtering that off, which really means it's got no effect anymore. These shootings do not have any effect anymore, and I think it's going to have a reinforcing in the Second Amendment, like you said.
It's reached a point of absurdity. I'm not even interested in reporting on him anymore. It's that boy who called Wolf. You know, we've seen too many of these fake shootings. Yeah. Sandy Hook, Boston bombing was spanned, Orlando, ridiculous. Well, you know, Charlottesville, Las Vegas, Parkland. It was all bullshit. I'm just stunned, Scott, that, you know.
The worst, of course, I think, was this past shooting where the camera from the helicopter saw the two police officers putting fake blood on their arms.
Yes.
That was a moment in history that I think we've really not absorbed to the fullest extent, because that right there is the greatest betrayal against Americans, to see police officers spraying themselves with blood. They've thrown the star on the ground and stepped on it. They've tore up the Constitution. They've raised a weapon against the American people that pays for their uniform and their job and their retirement, and they have attacked the American people. So that video should be, if there's any justice in this country, any righteousness in this country, that video and those police officers will be hauled into court and sent to jail, and this whole thing exposed, that particular shooting exposed for what they did with that fake blood, that needs to be shown all over the country. And as well as the other shooting that we saw a few weeks ago that was faked, and the police officers admitted it was faked.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the idea, by the way, of a Trump Truth channel, a TV channel, where they can feature shows like ours is actually a brilliant idea. I mean, we could have reports on Sandy Hook, on the Boston bombing, and all these other ridiculous, and people would see for themselves. Because you've
the real voice of America.
Stranglehold of the mainstream media. That is what is causing us to suffocate in disinformation, to not know the difference between the true and the false.
That's for sure. And I would say that those shootings that you talked about, most of those are in books that have been banned now. And why would they ban the books about those most significant events in our recent history? Well, it's because they do have a stranglehold on that. and so that the truth has essentially been politicized and all is lost if they can do that. So that's pretty bad. I really appreciate those solutions. That was a great story about Steele there, that he presented. Go for it.
Meanwhile, we have the Inspector General report. Former FBI Director Comey violated FBI policies in the handling of Trump memos. Comey's retention, handling, and dissemination of certain memos violated the department and FBI policies and his FBI employment agreement. Former FBI Director James Comey violated FBI policies, the Justice Department's Inspector General said Thursday. However, the DOJ has declined to prosecute him. We have a damning report stating he broke Bureau policy by leaking memos with classified information. The watchdog office at Comey broke the rules by giving a memo containing unclassified information to his friend Daniel Richman with instructions to share the contents with a reporter. The office also said Comey failed to notify the FBI after he was fired. He'd retained some of the memos in a safe at home. He wrote a series of memos about conversation with President Trump. He said unnerved him. Comey has stated he wanted to make a record of the interactions because he was concerned Trump might later lie about them. More on this to come. Comey turned over 7 memos to congressional investigators in April of 2018. 8 of their 15 pages were redacted. He told the Senate and Select Intelligence Committee in 2017 he leaked the memos following his May 2017 termination to prompt the appointment of a special counsel. Robert Mueller was later appointed. But of course, it all came to grief for the Democrats and backfired massively. Meanwhile, and this is why Comey's explanation is corrupt, FBI witnesses say Comey's Trump briefing was meant to collect info for the Russia probe. A Justice Department Inspector General's report sheds new light on Comey's January 6, 2017 briefing with Donald Trump regarding allegation made in the Steele dossier. We all remember this is about his allegedly hiring prostitutes to pee on a bed in which Barack Obama had allegedly slept, which was absurd on its face. The report cites witnesses who said the FBI and Comey wanted to use the briefing to collect information that could be used in the Russia probe against Trump. Comey has said he had the meeting merely to give him a heads up that the dossier might be published. Representative Jim Jordan, however, has observed the findings suggest Comey was out to get the president, about which there can be no doubt. Comey has long asserted he had the one-on-one meeting in order to give him a heads up about salacious rumors contained in the dossier, which British spy Christopher Steele has acknowledged to a British court, by the way, months ago now. He wrote as an employee of the Hillary Clinton DNC doing opposition research. In other words, it was all fabricated nonsense. It was brought up privately because the goal of the private session was to alert the incoming president to this piece of nonsense we thought was about to become public. Comey and the heads of 3 other intel community agencies, including then CIA Director Brennan and then National Intelligence Director Clapper, gave an initial briefing. And all they were, of course, involved in this conspiracy against Trump. But the Justice Department Office of the Inspector General report suggests Comey and the FBI saw other opportunities in the briefing. I think this is an image that captured it all of a FISIS review report. It's coming. I think it's coming in spades. Scott.
Yep.
Yeah, that was one of the criticisms of the Comey non-prosecution was it betrays everything, of course, that people have questioned, and it shows the corruption of the highest levels of the FBI: James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Bruce Orr, his wife Nellie Orr, Fusion GPS, Christopher Steele, the British MI6, the British MI5, Australia, Ukraine, all of these countries, all of these people, all of these organizations, and never mind the Mueller report and the 13 or whatever, how many Democrats, including Ginny Rhee, a Clinton Foundation lawyer, all participating in this Mueller report. We are a laughing stock if we take ourselves seriously, and if we think anyone else takes us seriously with this kind of a circus show. We really have entered the land of, I mean, retards, the blind and the fools, and call it Americana. But there's always hope that a revival and a renaissance and an awakening is going to occur in America, and it's going to start with the violent prosecutions and the merciless punishment of people like James Comey and all of these actors, McCabe, for bigger crimes. And that's the holdout. That's the hope, is that Barr and the Inspector General Horowitz and Trump have special prosecutors and investigators and teams assembling all of the evidence. I know Sidney Powell, representing Michael Flynn, has asked for the whole thing to be dismissed. And I debriefed her in Dallas, and I provided her with shell game, and I provided his brother with shell game and debriefed them about Covington and Burling. And a lot of that has gone into their pleadings. And I think if that happens, which it should, because the entire investigation of Flynn was fruit of the poisonous tree. I'm not saying he's a Boy Scout, but he certainly wasn't guilty of what they said he was guilty of. They twisted and distorted justice in order to entrap him. And I think if it's thrown out against Flynn, it sends this powerful reverberation that everything else is coming. These people will be prosecuted. I think that's one of the other election staples that Trump needs to have, Jim, as we commented earlier on Robert David Steele's analysis. Trump needs to have as his primary domestic policy weapon, I have came in to drain the swamp and go after the deep state and all of these corrupt actors, and I am doing exactly that. Between now and the election day of 2020, he needs to have heads on the chopping block, heads on the ground after being chopped, men in jail. I want to see Comey in a jumpsuit being hauled into jail. I want all these people being arrested as flight risks. If they can throw people like Marina Butina in jail for up to 2 years without charge, then they certainly can do it to James Comey and Andrew McCabe and Bruce Orr and Nellie Orr. They didn't just violate Department of Justice protocols and procedures by handing away notes. They gave notes away with a purpose, the intent, the criminal intent, the mens rea, to harm a sitting president, to overthrow a sitting president, to overthrow the Constitution and the rights of the people of the United States of America, the rules by which we operate and live and have our government. They did that on purpose, and they should be tried for treason. That's the charge, treason.
That's right.
You went in to go after the American president and overthrow him and cause chaos and do all sorts of distortions. You risk massive civil wars. I want to see prosecutors going in there like that, Maximilian Schell, I think the old actor in that great old black and white movie about the persecution of the Nazis, the tribunal at Nuremberg. I want to see explosive passion prosecuting these people between now and 2020. If Trump does that and he says, look at me, see all these piñatas hanging by the neck, we're going to hit them and spill all the guts. And if he does that, it boosts his chance. That's the other failure too, is the Epstein thing. Epstein, by being allowed to either die or be killed, if he is dead, shows we are the most incompetent, stupid people in government and president and Department of Justice Attorney General, or the most corrupt, because that man should not be dead. He should be in a witness protection program surrounded by SEALs, Green Berets, Marines, and Army guys to make sure that he testified about all the dead bodies, all of the dead children, all of the hidden bank accounts, all of the Mossad intelligence operations, all of the compromised American political leaders that were caught having sex with little boys, including most likely Lindsey Graham. Let's have all of these people exposed by Jeffrey Epstein. But now the common thing that we see is that can't happen because he's dead. That makes me have a very big problem with that, Mr. Trump, because you look like an idiot if he's dead. I hope he's not. I understand there are secret operations. But the same thing with Julian Assange. Jim, we just had John Waters of Pink Floyd The Wall, one of the most iconic voices in American music, or not American music, I should say British music, Pink Floyd The Wall, who is defined by being anti-establishment, anti-totalitarian, anti-authoritarian impulses. The whole Wall, the whole musical ensemble about that was about that. yes, they're kind of socialist, but for Pink Floyd's Roger Waters to stand up and do a guitar playing in support of Julian Assange, who is one of the best whistleblowers, is one of the most Nobel Prize persons that should be nominated. Julian Assange, that has all of the WikiLeaks cables that expose Hillary Clinton and Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer and Obama and Robert Wolf, chairman of the Americas. I know it. I live this. Swiss banks, shell game, 19,000 bank accounts from Saudi Arabia, from Qatar, from United Arab Emirates, from Egypt, from all of these countries, going into Libya, going into Syria, CIA black operations. Julian Assange has all of that. And he's sitting in a jail in Britain that John Pilsner has seen him at. That, again, is either we are the stupidest or most corrupt people, government, and president in the history of humanity, or something else is going on. I'd like to think something else is going on, that he's not there, that he's in a witness protection program, but I'm finding it increasingly difficult to believe that they are. I'm sadly coming to the edge of the cliff that these people are either dead or they are in prison. And really, America has entered that Pink Floyd The Wall, where we are a bunch of pigs floating in the sky, and only revolution can liberate us, Jim.
Scott, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I'll just make a comment. Go ahead, Jim.
I'm worried that Epstein might have been improperly sprung and not be in a witness protection program, Scott. I'm just very, very worried that the situation may be the worst possible outcome. I mean, he's obviously not dead.
Yeah. And again, it's the optics, isn't it? It's the optics that matter. What are the majority of American people seeing? What are 75, 80% of the people seeing? 90%. It's a very small sliver of enlightened souls that pay attention to the smart people and the smart shows, and thank God Don Guerin is one of them having it up there. People don't get this from anywhere else. But what are the average Americans seeing? They're seeing Epstein is dead, and they're seeing it from Fox News and all these other, Hannity and all these people, and they're seeing Julian Assange is in jail, and that hypocrisy is going to rust Trump's veneer. Not give him a patina of a Statue of Liberty green, but give him a red, rotting rust of death to his reputation because of Epstein, because of WikiLeaks, because of all the narrative, the mainstream media narrative that is being spun out there. Again, a truth channel is exactly right, Jim. He needs to recognize it, encourage it, go on it, and do it quickly. It has to be between now and 2020. He needs to go on.
He's so media savvy, Scott. That's a suggestion he might actually pick up on. I mean, you know, give it to Robert David Steele. He could organize this thing and make it be a fantastic success.
Yeah.
Amen. Right.
Here's a profoundly troubling story that I think is probably exactly right. Is the DNC establishment backing Trump while rigging the nomination against Bernie and Tulsi? This is a question asked by a great many DNC CDP, that's California Democratic Party members, last weekend, as they tried to understand the scheduling debacle that pitted the Democratic National Committee meeting in San Francisco against the California Democratic Party meeting in San Jose, 1 to 3 hours away, depending on traffic, on the two main days for both events, August 23rd and 24th. Attendees had to choose which to attend and which to miss. It turned out the CDP did better on overall attendance than the DNC. When Tom Perez spoke, there were about 100 delegates in the DNC ballroom. The crowd significantly increased when Bernie spoke. At the CDP meeting, the crowd in the general session ranged from 300 to 500. Not very large, in my opinion, but these are primarily leading activists. As Bernie was about to speak at the DNC Friday, Kamala Harris's supporters loudly walked out of the hall and continued to make noise.
Bennett.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead, Jim.
Continued to make noise outside in an attempt to drown out Bernie. One might think this would create disfavor with the DNC. However, most party leaders said they were supporting a Harris-Warren ticket. Look at that. Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, 2 senators, 2 women. I think that's not going to fly. I think that's ridiculous. leading some progressives to wonder if this was an officially sanctioned affront against Bernie. The DNC was in charge of the microphone volume. There was no lack of security to handle the problem. They could have dealt with it. Meanwhile, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, who gave up her DNC career to back Bernie in 2016, is the candidate the establishment most fears. Tulsi has more than met the debate criteria in the number of unique donations and in poll numbers in 26 of the most respected national polls. But the DNC, fearing she will take down another establishment candidate, as she did with Kamala Harris, refusing to let Tulsi into the third debate against candidates who have lower polling numbers in most polls and significantly fewer unique contributions in Tulsi. The problem, or maybe the plan, is the smaller DNC-approved polls have mostly avoided polling over the last month as a block to allowing Tulsi into the third debate, given that she was the most searched for candidate after the first two. Her poll numbers should have come up, so they simply haven't done the polling. Bernie activists have reportedly learned the DNC plans to go after him once Tulsi is out of the way, chose not to take things lying down. Tulsi is the only candidate with a history of having Bernie's back. Several activists went to party leaders and asked point blank whether blocking popular candidates like Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie Sanders from being nominated would be worth a second term for Donald Trump. To the surprise of the activist, leaders spoke clearly that holding Bernie and Tulsi to the contract they were forced to sign before the first debate was more important than fairness in beating Donald Trump. So talk about which candidates they plan to run in 2024 if Trump is reelected. An assistant to one of the party bosses, who asked not to be identified for fear of losing his job, pointed out the DNC makes more money as a result of anger about Donald Trump's presidency than they would if a popular progressive such as Bernie Sanders or Tulsi Gabbard became president. One person pointed out a ticket with Warren and Harris would be labeled progressive, and the expected loss would be used to McGovern or kill the progressive movement within the party. Tulsi Gabbard had been redeployed militarily. She's a major in the medical corps prior to the DNC meeting and was only able to attend by a pre-recorded video. Interestingly, and I wonder if that didn't enter into their scheduling, at the DNC meeting, her table was placed in a corner away from everyone. The supporters were told to sit there like good little children. One Tulsi supporter broke the mold, handed out copies of Senator Mike Gravel's endorsement letter of Tulsi inside the DNC meeting. The letter on Gravel's stationery called Tulsi, quote, the most qualified and prepared candidate. Yep. At the CDP event, the Gabbard supporters weren't sitting in a corner. Everyone who attended the larger CDP meeting received a copy of Gravel's endorsement letter and other literature in support of Gabbard. It was reported that over 1,000 pieces of Tulsi literature were distributed to Democrats attending the CDP executive board meeting and caucuses. The attendees there were greeted by a giant volunteer painted banner at the ballroom door at both general sessions. Top behind-the-scenes DNC leader Bob Mulholland was seen studying Tulsi's military picture in the banner. Scott, your comments.
Well, Tulsi Gabbard, I think, is the best qualified candidate for the Democrat nomination and for president after Donald Trump. What makes Trump borderline good, of course, is he embraces the traditional, or at least he seems to embrace the traditional family values emblem and small government, low taxes, right to keep and bear arms, the typical boilerplate beliefs and principles of the Republican Party. However, his actions also hint at a deception about all of that because of his rampant, delusional support of the Israeli Zionist militarism.
Scott, you there?
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Scott.
Yeah.
Anyway, I make.
What's wrong, Don? What are you saying, Don? Scott's here.
Yeah, I'm here. So Trump's delusional support of the Zionist military juggernaut puts him in jeopardy.
Okay.
But Tulsi Gabbard seems to be rising up, and this has again, we've seen this stink before. We've seen them undermine Bernie Sanders before in preference for Hillary Clinton, and they risk really gutting the party where all the reasonable rational, non-angry members of the Democrat Party are going to leave and become libertarians or become, just wait out this election, because what's going to be left if you lose Tulsi Gabbard, if you lose Bernie Sanders, you're going to have the Kamala Harris, racist, black, angry, feminist woman types that is very, very small, that no one's going to support because they're afraid of her, because of her bloodlust and her damning abuse of power and her impending authoritarian tyranny. I've said before, if Kamala Harris was president, you'd have a civil war, because she'd be sending the most racist, violent police thugs and military thugs out all over the country to forcibly confiscate guns by red flag laws, to forcibly impose reparations, it would be South Africa all over again. I could see that coming. South Africa, reverse apartheid in America, and we know how that would end. A civil war, and we know who wins in that case, because the American people are the well-armed people. So Tulsi Gabbard, how they handle her will depend on the long-term survivability of the Democrat Party. I think they're so delusional that they're going to throw her under the bus and throw Bernie Sanders under the bus. And Bernie Sanders is an old, he needs to get out of the way anyway. But what they will have left are the most militant voices that no one will believe. And if Trump is smart, he'll bring in Tulsi Gabbard into a high level of his cabinet to do the job. And as we said before, Jim, that Virginia lawmaker that stood up and gave an impassioned plea about the Second Amendment, I believe he would be a great candidate for vice president. Trump needs a better guy than Pence and a younger guy than Pence that people can give hope for in 2024.
I'd even suggest Tulsi herself, Scott.
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed.
Isn't Tulsi is probably the most qualified person? Why? Because of all the candidates, she's the only one that's been to war, right, in the service. She's seen it.
Well, I think that's the only reason. She's also the only non-interventionist among all the Democratic candidates. She's also one who seems to have reasonable attitudes about immigration. She seems to be a respecter of the law. She has many, many virtues. She needs better education on gun control, but I think that's her primary weakness. But I really like her. Meanwhile, we have a new 2020 poll showing a three-way tie between Sanders, Warren, and Biden. Since the dead heat, Sanders and Warren with 20%, Mr. Biden with 19%. The Monmouth University poll released Monday hints at a concerning trend for Biden, who's dropped from 32% when it was taken in June. Both Sanders and Warren have picked up several percentage points, but Biden is dropping. The main takeaway from this poll is the Democratic race has become volatile. Liberal voters are starting to cast a vote for a candidate they can identify with. Moderate voters who've been paying less attention seem to be expressing doubts about Biden. Here are the 10, by the way, who are going to appear at the third debate, not including, of course, Tulsi. I think this can actually work to her advantage because it can be obvious this is an undistinguished group of clowns, that they don't have significant views, and that Tulsi, assuming she qualifies for the fourth, will come in as a breath of fresh air and deserve further consideration. That's my take here. While only one poll, the results seem to bolster the findings of a poll by The Economist and YouGov that also hinted at a tightening race, with Biden with 22, Sanders 19, and Warren at 18. Meanwhile, the Biden campaign is suggesting the poll was an outlier, noting it was based on a relatively small sample size and an average of national polls calculated by Real Clear Politics, put the former vice president ahead with 27.2 to Sanders 16.7 and Warren 16.2. Scott, I want to stop there momentarily to take your comments about those findings before I turn to Biden. I actually think that a Sanders Gabbard ticket could win as a third party ticket.
Yeah. I think you're right. If they wanted to win, they would have a Sanders Gabbard ticket, and I think it would be powerful because it would attract a lot of the independents and a lot of the Democrats. But I mean, I'm hoping that they're not that smart. I'm hoping that the Democrats have lost all of their sanity and are going off the cliff in a kamikaze, self-flagellating, self-immolating, or immolating inferno, because it just shows who they are. It shows their true colors. And you know, Biden, please, Biden is ready for, you know, the retirement pasture, and it's time for him to go. It's amazing that they've even put him up, but he's like Dole, right? They put up Biden like they put up Bob Dole against Clinton when Clinton was running for a second term. So there is validity in the analysis that the Democrat National Committee establishment is interested in money and power, and they've surrendered this one already to Donald Trump, and they're using this just to whip up and maintain their animosity, their donations, and you know, the establishment. But if they isolate and overthrow Tulsi Gabbard and she denounces the Democrat Party for what it's become, and so does Bernie Sanders, then all of this can blow up on them and backfire. Jim?
I think it would make it a really exciting competition. Now, here's Dana Milbank, who's a bleeding heart liberal with absolutely devastating critique of Biden. You got to listen to this carefully. If this is a Democrat's best hope, they better start praying. This is the editor's comment, not Milbank. This opinion piece by Dana Milbank at the Washington Post really illustrates how serious Biden's gaffe and misstatements problems are. The case can be made that Biden is not as bad as Trump, but that's a super low bar. The case cannot be made that Joe Biden is a stellar candidate. This is a very real problem. Get this. There's no surer way to convince people you are going nuts than to stand in front of a crowd and announce that you are not going nuts. I want to be clear, I'm not going nuts, Joe Biden declared at a campaign stop Friday as he struggled to identify the location of a speech he had just given. Nothing is more likely to raise doubts about your mental acuity than to misidentify the state you're in. What's not to like about Vermont, Biden asked Sunday in New Hampshire. He previously confused Burlington, Iowa with Burlington, Vermont. And nothing will get your relatives to demand power of attorney more rapidly than misplacing a decade. Bobby Kennedy and Dr. King had been assassinated in the 70s, the late 70s, when I got engaged, Biden said last week. Both, of course, were taken out in 1968. Oh, God love me. What is this malarkey? The former vice president has admitted to being a gaffe machine. That's false modesty. He is the Lamborghini of laughs. He announced that poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. He located El Paso and Dayton mass shootings in Houston and Michigan. He recalled a visit with survivors of the 2018 Parkland shooting before the shooting had taken place. He convinced Margaret Thatcher with Theresa May and Angela Merkel, referred to the Second Amendment as the first, tripled the number of casualties of the Kent State shooting, mixed up his campaign website with a text message code. At the Iowa State Fair, he thundered, "We choose truth over facts." Less facetiously, he also joked about gay waiters, entitled millennials in his too tactile ways, and praised the segregationist civility. Things got so bad that Biden's neurologist offered a virtual doctor's note telling Politico he's as sharp as he was 31 years ago. True, Biden has been churning out malapropism since 1987 when he was still delivering Neil Kinnock speeches plagiarized by him. This is a man who claimed, "I've known 8 presidents, 3 of them intimately." Even with such intimate knowledge, he later confided, "I'd rather be at home making love to my wife while my children are asleep." He proclaimed Barack Obama the first African-American in the history of the United States. During a rally, he called attention to a 3-letter word, jobs. He once introduced his running mate as Barack America. Some say it's unfair to draw attention to Biden when President Trump is the most mendacious politician ever. I disagree. Biden's gaffes are to be celebrated, for they make him exciting. When he opens his mouth, nobody knows what's going to come out, least of all Biden. Who can forgive him saying this is a big effing deal after Obamacare's passage, or admitting as he tried to sell the stimulus, there's still a 30% chance we're going to get it wrong. I am so certain that Biden's gaffes will propel him to victory that I've written him a draft acceptance speech based on actual Bidenisms for the Democratic convention in Milwaukee. Listen to this. Oh, Memphis. Ladies and gentlemen, genders, there are at least three. I say this is a big effing deal. I see poor kids in the arena. I see white kids. I see Grandpa Finnegan. God rest his soul. I would not be here in Manchester accepting your nomination without the support of articulate, clean black people. And you disabled men stand up. I have known you intimately, so I say I would rather be making love to my wife. You are a dull audience, fellow Democrats. There's a 30% chance everything I do will be wrong. Bernie, Elizabeth, Kamala, and others would have been better picks than me, but I am here because of a three-letter word, truth. We choose truth over facts. If elected, I promise we will have an international crisis. Let me be clear. I am not going nuts. So go to my website number and help me. Vote for Joe America. Good night, Montgomery. I am stunned. That's the way it is. Scott, that's the Joe Biden the Democrats may very well nominate to be their presidential nominee.
I hope so. I sincerely hope so, because it shows the farce that has become Americana.
Yeah, that's right.
It's shown the laughingstock and the sad reality that we have descended into the abyss of stupidity and rage and ignorance and schizophrenia, the gender, transgender, transvestite, homosexual madness, the rage and the American military juggernaut that, under Obama continued with Syria and Ukraine and, Iraq and Afghanistan. And I think they were planning on doing all of this to Iran despite the nuclear deal. So, there's no appeasement of the Democrats. They've gone off the ledge. Biden, I hope, does get nominated, and because I think it would be a guarantee that Trump would be reelected. And of course, I think Kamala Harris is another one, because no one will vote for an angry, racist black woman who slept like a prostitute with Willie Brown, the black mayor of San Francisco, one of the most corrupt individuals in the history of politics. That's Kamala Harris's sugar daddy that she, got her political start in. All of these people, except for Tulsi Gabbard, which is an honorable officer, a woman who's been to war, who's seen war and despises it and wants to disconnect us. She is the best. She is the best candidate for doing that if Donald Trump doesn't step up and do it first. And I think Bernie Sanders is also in that vein, as he said he doesn't want war with Iran. He doesn't want blatant support for Israel. He doesn't believe in the Yemen-Saudi bombing necessarily. I don't believe in his socialism and all of his other impulses, but they are far better than what I mean. Biden would be harmless because he's so feeble, but the danger is the people behind him would be manipulating him in all sorts of exploitive ways. Jim?
Well, the Lamborghini of gaffes is not only the most vulnerable and ridiculous of the candidates and easiest to satirize, as Dana Milback did so brilliantly, but this is before we even get around to the 20-second commercial in the Oval Office with Senator Chris Coons being sworn in, and Biden leans down to his daughter and says, "Do you have any idea how horny it makes me to be standing beside a 13-year-old girl?" I mean, Scott, this is outrageous. Are the Democrats just putting a big gun to their head and pulling the trigger?
I hope so.
Yeah, that would be good.
I mean, it's absolutely staggering, the weaknesses of this candidate. Meanwhile, the former Fed president says the Fed has a role to play in defeating Trump in 2020. I find this profoundly disturbing. The Federal Reserve is not a U.S. government agency. They are an independent bank owned by foreign interests. When they pump money into our economy, it decreases the value of your savings. That is its purpose, to drain wealth from working class Americans. Certain previous presidents have known this and fought back. The Fed has been taken down before. President Trump seems to understand the truth about the Fed, but he's playing his cards close to his chest on this issue. Now the Fed, which makes its bones by devaluing your hard-earned money, is being urged by its former president to use its power to undermine Trump's chances at re-election. In August, Zero Hedge wrote, by scapegoating the global economy for the Fed's July 31st rate cut, the central bank had now trapped itself, having certified before the world that any further escalations in Trump's trade war are effectively a justification for more rate cuts. Whether this was Powell's intention is unclear, though, as we said at the time, it certainly means that Trump is now de facto in charge of the Fed's monetary policy by way of U.S. foreign policy. It also means that, as Bank of America wrote, the Fed is unintentionally underwriting the trade war. This implies the Fed is underwriting Trump's trade war with China. This is a self-perpetuating feedback loop that could cause serious problems. Even the Fed itself said there's the risk of an adverse feedback loop where the trade war hinders economic growth, thereby prompting additional Fed easing, which in turn allows for greater trade war escalation. The way it works is more tariffs weaken the economy by driving costs above what small and medium-sized businesses can afford. The Fed gets involved by employing quantitative easing, which is when the Fed buys properties to stimulate the economy. Then the economy is strengthened, which leads to further inhibitions on further tariffs. Admittedly, this is highly speculative. It depends a great deal on psychology. It assumes Trump will predictably increase tariff use if the economy is stronger. If it's accurate, it means the Fed is intentionally feeding into a system that limits the growth of the economy, which is one of Trump's biggest appeals to voters. In other words, it's election meddling by the Fed. Meanwhile, Common Cause. James, we must never again allow the presidential candidate who loses the popular vote to occupy the chair in the Oval Office. But that's exactly what happened twice in the last 5 elections. The answer? Pass the National Popular Vote Compact to fix the broken Electoral College. If National Popular Vote is passed by enough state members, the Electoral College will cast their vote for the winner of the popular vote in all 50 states. This plan works because the current state-by-state winner-take-all system isn't written anywhere in the Constitution. So if states with a total of 270 electoral votes agree together to give theirs to the candidate who wins the most votes nationwide, we can prevent the candidate like Donald Trump who loses the popular vote from ending up in the White House. I wrote to them, your actions are undemocratic, un-American, and subvert the Constitution. Morons. Trump actually won the popular vote, as Richard Charnon has demonstrated. Find his book on Amazon.com. It would eviscerate any reason for candidates to give attention to the smaller, even the mid-sized states. It would yield the result that all campaigning would be focused on the 5 largest states to the detriment of the nation. Common Cause is disgracing itself by promoting undemocratic and un-American policies that sabotage the Constitution. James, that's PhD. Don.
This is the first half. Come on back for the second half on September 2nd. We got to leave here right now. So thank you so much.